Hello, and welcome back to another episode of our student run podcast called 125 Thoughts. My name is Megan Cronin, and in this episode, I am with Professor Kristen Harrison, who is a professor here at the University of Michigan for Communication and Media. Here, she's going to join me to discuss the relationship between social media and body image for adolescents. So I was extremely grateful to have an expert here with me today. Thank you for joining me. I know that you have studied the role of traditional media, such as like magazines, television, advertisements on unhealthy eating behaviors and body image issues. But today we're going to try to focus more on how the exponential growth of social media specifically has affected body image for adolescents. So my first question for you is, what one word would you use to describe the relationship between social media and body image?
What one word?
Yeah, a single word.
The word would probably be constant.
Constant.
There's no real peace from it, right? Because social media are, depending on the social medium or the site that you're looking at, just they're more or less image based. And so if you're looking at Twitter, that's mostly, language based, but there are still images. People can upload images. And then if you go all the way over to the other end on Instagram or TikTok, it's very heavily image based. So even if you go into using these social network or social media sites to, to laugh or to connect with friends or to find out what the news is, you almost can't escape being exposed to imagery that can prime thoughts about body ideals and about your own body.
Exactly. And do you think are you familiar with the term highly visual social media and how that's what we predominantly are? Do you think the transition to that form of media has negatively impacted a lot of teenagers or adolescents and their thoughts on their body or what their body should look like?
That's definitely what the research shows. And I think that there are a couple of reasons for this. One is when you're thinking about traditional visual media like magazines and TV shows and movies and so on, we would be exposed to them for a certain amount of time. If your TV show was on at a certain time, or if you're binge watching, there's a beginning and an end to it. But with social media, we check in, daily to see how our friends or our favorite celebrities are doing, and it could be any time of the day. So the potential for exposure is 24/7. It's any time that you check in, you're going to be seeing some of this content. And so there's just a lot more exposure overall from social media than there is from traditional mass media. And then the other reason that it's a bigger issue is depending again on the sites that we go to, we actually have people we know there among all of the celebrities. So in a magazine, most of us wouldn't know the people in the magazine, and we'd be looking at models and actors and people like that who are paid to look enviable. When we go to social media, we're seeing some of those people, but we're also seeing people we know. And the research on body image and eating disorders, the older research suggests that peer effects are quite a bit stronger than media effects. So what happens when you've got your peers in the media and they can make themselves look more or less like the models do in, magazines using filters and digital editing and things like that. So now it's sort of like we've brought that world of visual perfection closer to us around the clock and connected to our own communities with social media.
Kind of another more general question. So, what do you think in general, not specifically just body image, is the relationship with social media and mental health?
I actually assign some of this work in my classes that I teach. I teach a class called Children in Media and Media in the Body, and we discuss this. And what's interesting is a lot of the research just looks at the amount of time that you're spending on social media.
Yeah.
And then, depending on the sample that the researcher is looking at, often you'll see a connection with poorer mental health. But it's hard to establish causality because let's say you're depressed And outside of the COVID era, when we're all isolating ourselves at home, usually depression is associated with more isolation, whereas less depressed people are out, socializing.
Yes.
And when you are isolating, a default activity is media use. So the connection between social media use and mental health, poorer mental health, isn't necessarily a causal one. However, there's some other research that has gone deeper than just the amount of time you spend on social media. And it shows that people who use social media to stay in touch with friends, that for them, social media use is connected to better mental health. But people who use media to look at what's going on in the world around them and just lurk, the ones who are not, communicating with people they know, but who are just lurking and watching, for those people, the connection is with poorer mental health. And you can imagine why, right? They're looking at the world that they're not being part of. Whereas the first group of people are using social media literally to maintain and enrich their relationships with people they know.
And do you think that there are a number of positive effects of social media on mental health that can kind of help, or do you think the negative ones outnumber it? What's your opinion on that?
Well, that's tricky, right?
Yeah,
Because the average person is probably doing multiple things on social media. So it's not like, for example, I use Facebook. I get on every morning at about 5:30 because I wake up really early. I have to take care of my kids, and I have other friends, other mom friends, working mom friends who are up at that time. And we'll message each other, we'll post funny things, and we would never get to see each other in person because, the demands of our lives keep us in our houses. And it's wonderful and it keeps me going, right? But if I were using that time to, go onto TikTok and watch videos of people describing how little they ate in a day, because that's one of the,
exactly.
the subgenres on TikTok, I'd feel horrible. So, so, but the most of us don't do all or nothing, right? We might do a little bit of relationship maintenance. We might do a little bit of, looking at our favorite celebrities and feeling bad about our bodies. And so I haven't seen any research that has actually tried to sort of estimate what is the balance of social media? Has it made your life better or made your life worse? Because depending on what we use it for, we could definitely be having problematic as well as adaptive effects from social media. But one of the things you can always pay attention to as an individual is, what do you think? What are you getting out of this, right? Are you walking away from these social media sessions feeling watered, right? Like a plant that's got what it needs to get through another day, or are you walking away feeling depleted? And if you're feeling depleted, then you have to think about what changes can you make, because there's so many options out there, right? So what changes can you make in your social media use to make sure that the content, the opportunities for communication are with people who support you, and that the content you're exposed to makes you feel inspired or good about yourself as opposed to second rate.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that you're right. Individual media usage, it's so dependent on the person and how they use it. And age groups, obviously, like you said, if you go on TikTok, that's more targeted towards children or maybe adolescents, but there's not so many, moms on TikTok that are
Yeah.
watching these videos, whereas vice versa, there's not as many kids on Facebook, maybe seeing the positive connect, talking with their family members, with their friends. So that's why I feel as if there is a really interesting dynamic between the negatives and the positives, and where it goes too far, but it's not completely detrimental for our health. So, what do you think, kind of segueing over to body image focus for all of social media, what would you define body image as?
Oh wow, there are whole books on this topic,
Yeah.
and it's it goes way back in history, and to things I had never even thought about. But we often think of body image as, oh, do you think your body meets whatever ideal is considered attractive in your culture? But it's much more than that. People will have a sort of body image of what their body represents in terms of their spirituality, in terms of just the body soul dichotomy, the sort of Cartesian division between body and spirit. There is literature on body image that goes back to that. So it's this idea of you can be thinking of your body not just in terms of how it appears to you and how you think it appears to others and how they would evaluate it, but also in terms of how it supports you, whether it's able or whether it has disabilities, whether it's a place of comfort for you, whether it is something that you are grateful for or not grateful for. Again, not just because other people like the way it looks, but because of what it offers you. So body image is actually a huge area of identity, because your body is the thing that, like, it's like the stork dropped you into this body, right? And this is what you got, and this is what I got, and this is what we carry around with us, and this is the only home we will ever know while we're on the earth. So there are so many ways that we can be thinking about it, and we really narrow it down when we only think about body image as, do I feel good about the way my body looks to others sexually, when in fact it's much, much bigger than that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think especially now there's been a lot of like objectification of people in the media, and you have to look a certain way, and it's
Yes.
all like based on, am I sexually appealing to all these other people?
My
And
lab,
that's why,
oh
sorry.
yeah, my lab is we're doing a project now on body positivity. And so we've been having a lot of these discussions, and even the body positivity movement is still sort of seen as, oh, well, look, you don't quite meet this ideal, but you're still worth it anyway, which again, I think is really missing the point. And so I joke around because I'm in my 50s, and I joke around with my students. I'm like, my body positivity is two things. Number one, I have a body, and number two, it's still above ground. And for that, it's like I got to be grateful.
Gotta be grateful enough.
And
Yeah.
I mean, there's a grim side of that too, with so many people losing their lives with this disease. There's a point at which you just go, wow, like I'm really glad my body is still keeping me here, whatever it takes. And so it's moving your body positivity again to a deeper level than just, do strangers approve of me when they see me walk into a room?
That's such an interesting point that you bring up with the pandemic, because me right now as a nursing student, I'm learning about chemistry of our bodies, the biological things that we do, and it's like a human is an amazing organism. There's so many things you can do, and if you get coronavirus and you can survive, it's, you have to have an appreciation for yourself and your body's ability to fight that off, and be grateful that you still are here, even if you don't look like some Instagram model,
Yeah,
etc.
exactly. It's like we focus so much on how we're angry at our bodies, right? Like if my body has an appetite for candy or something, because I love sugar.
Exactly.
So if I eat a lot of sugar, right, and I'm so mad at my body, and in the meantime, my body's like, well, okay, you go ahead and be ungrateful while I heal and keep you alive. So I try to remember that, like that my body has more wisdom than I do. But we tend, in a social world, we tend to give so much credence to people who we give too much credit, I think, to other people to determine how we should feel about ourselves.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that leads to like so much body dissatisfaction. So I was curious if, I don't know if you have a rough estimate or you have no idea about, when you, if you had to guess, what amount of adolescents would you say struggle with body dissatisfaction?
I'm not sure what the most reliable recent estimates are, although most of the studies I see, at least especially with girls and young women, more than half
Yeah,
of the samples will say that there's something they don't like about their bodies. There's something they wish they could change.
that's so much. It's just so eye-opening. People always say you're your own toughest critic, and if you think you look so awful, the next person is probably thinking, "Oh my gosh, this about me I don't like. I wish I had that of hers," etc.
Right.
So it's like it's half. That's crazy. Half of people all
And
think that.
there is also there is a sort of controversy within the body positivity movements now too, because you will often see people who look quite a bit like the models in magazines saying things like, I know I have hip dips, or I know I don't have much inner thigh clearance, but I'm still going to love my body the way it is. And then people who fall into the category that would be very easily stereotyped as fat or quote unquote morbidly obese, who are struggling to be positive about their bodies when they're treated like they have no right to exist, on the earth. And the latter group feeling kind of like, hey, wait a minute, like, please don't equate us with, like, please don't look at this tiny thing and go, I'm this far from perfect when I am so far from what my culture says has any value at all, that I can't even look at you. Like if you're thinking your body is not valuable or attractive, what must you think of me?
Yeah.
So it gets complicated, when people are kind of trying to reclaim some personal value and they're really far outside of what we see again and again and again being sold as a sort of capitalist, body ideal.
Yeah, so it's almost like someone else trying to be positive is discrediting others in a way. It feels like.
Yeah, or like almost like saying it almost is buying into the ideal of quote unquote perfectionism by saying, my body is imperfect, but I love it anyway, when your body is that close to the ideal.
Yeah,
So if it's that close and you're calling yourself imperfect, it suggests that you really do believe that there is this
but
sort of,
there's
yes, that there
like
is
a
this one
spectrum
place
of what it should be.
valuable.
Exactly.
Exactly. I don't even like using the word perfect because it reinforces the idea that this even is perfect. Like, who has
Yeah,
any, like, who knows what, there is no single
perfect.
perfect. There's just,
Yeah.
you might be really attracted to this type of body and someone else might not, so it's very individual.
So I am curious to hear your opinion on, I know you said for the estimate of those that struggle with body dissatisfaction is about half for girls. Do
More than
you
half, yeah.
more than half for girls? What do you think it is, or what do you think young adolescent males feel about their body and body dissatisfaction? Well, it's different. That definitely still happens.
Oh, it's different, and it happens more than people realize. I think that the difference is, well, so I don't know what the stats are right now, but I have seen studies and talked to people in the health systems at various universities who say that they see more male students who are using anabolic steroids than they see female students who are dealing with bulimia. So it's just it's more, I think it's more undercover for men, boys and men. I've studied the muscular body ideal, what's called drive for muscularity in boys and men.
Yeah, I think
And
I read something about that.
yeah, it's pretty
Yeah.
strong. I think that it leads to a sort of different kind of set of experiences because for boys and men, well, muscularity is something you build, right? And it takes work, but it's something you build. It's easier to focus on building something than it is to create an absence. So in other words, if you're trying to get thinner and thinner, you have to go hungry. Whereas if you're trying to get bigger with muscularity, you got to work out, but at least you get to eat and do the workout. So there's more of a sense of control, I think, for men with body issues. That's not to say, though, that there aren't men dealing with serious body dysmorphia and disordered eating, because they deal with it too.
Yeah, except it just that's what I focused on a lot also. While girls, it's they're trying to be skinny ideal. Boys, it's oh my gosh, if someone calls me skinny, I need to get bigger. I need to go to the gym more. I need to eat more protein. And I feel as if a lot of that's caused by kind of gender stereotyping
Yeah.
and kind of what's ideal. Do you agree with that? And kind of the cultural sense of what creates that? Is that like the main push behind all this?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think one thing we don't really talk about that much is that there's a sort of heterosexual relational ideal in our culture that positions men as being bigger and women as smaller, even with color, men darker, women lighter. Like if you look at the old fashioned little bridal figures that would go on the top of wedding cakes, the man almost always has brown hair, the woman has blonde hair, and they're
Yeah.
usually white, and she's short. Um, and it's kind of funny too, because in film, and if we look at film history, this idea of the man has to be bigger than the woman, it's not even really how big either of them are. It's that he has to be bigger than her. When you get actors who are all kind of roughly, average in height, then you end up with actresses, if they're supposed to play the heterosexual romantic interest, who have to be tiny so that
Yeah.
they're definitely visually smaller than these actors. So then we're like, oh, this celebrity wears a size 2 or something. Well, yeah, because she's teensy. They, to make the men look bigger than life, they have to make the love interest, they have to choose actresses who are really small. And then somehow, because of this weird, um, you know, this weird thing in film, in trying to make these men look larger than life, we're all sort of dealing with this. Well, what's wrong with me if I'm not a size 0? Well, I'm 6 feet tall, like
Oh my
I wouldn't
goodness.
have one of these jobs anyway. So it's almost like it's like comparing yourself to a jockey or something, right? Like jockeys have to
Yeah.
be really small and light to ride horses. This particular job requires actors, women, the women who are acting, to be really tiny, to fit this weird sort of heterosexual ideal that makes the man look like this big hero type figure.
Man, I've never thought about that ever. That is absolutely crazy. But that's so true when you think about it. When you see like people idealize these actors or sexiest man of the year or whatever, it's an actor like Zac Efron, but apparently he's very short and like
Yes.
it's just crazy. And then you don't because you see him as this huge guy, but maybe this actress, what she's 5 feet tall, which is
Yeah.
3 4 inches
Yeah.
below what's average, which I think
Yeah.
people don't
You're
realize
supposed
it's
to. You're look at where the camera lines up. So this is where it's good to be a media professor. You pay attention where the camera lines up. So if Zac Efron is on the screen, you can be sure the camera is a little bit below his head, so that when you look at him on the screen, you think that he is you think he's taller than you. Like he's meant to look tall. They never bring the camera above the head looking down at him. They always have it at most equal, but usually lower than the main male character. So for decades, anyone you've talked to who's met an actor, a famous actor, will be like, they were so short. I couldn't believe how short they were. Because the camera is, we just assume if the camera's looking up, then they're taller than we are. So part of it is that larger than life hero thing, trying to make this guy look big. And some of that is by choosing really small women to pair them with.
wow, that's crazy. Never thought of that ever. But when you reflect back on it, it just makes complete sense.
Yeah, well, and there are some exceptions, right? Like Zendaya is
Yeah,
getting all sorts of movie roles, and
yeah.
she's sort of like the triple threat with like acting and
Singing,
singing and
dancing, yeah.
everything. Yeah. So somewhere they're just like, okay, you're tall. We're just going to have the guy stand on a box. But for the most part, unless somebody stands out like that, it's usually very, very petite, very small women. And then, of course, life is really hard for them too, because they're expected to stay small. They're expected to, not eat that much. They're expected to be barely there for this hero, this protagonist in the movie.
Yeah, and when you think actors or models, people in the media that people do idealize and they want their body, if they do speak out about those struggles, do you think that that's very effective, or do you think it's almost less effective about what you were saying before, like, oh, this woman has a perfect body and she speaks about her own problems, like, how should that make me feel? Do you think that helps body dissatisfaction or hurts it?
I I don't know of any, because I'm a researcher. So my
Yeah,
first
yeah,
thought is
you don't
always,
know. It's
well, let
research.
me tell you what's been in the research. I don't know of any research that's looked at that specifically, although it seems like it's reassuring, at least when stars who are, models, actors, whoever, who are known for being thin, say, it's too hard on my body. I left modeling because it was too hard on my body. They never let me eat. Something to remind the viewer that she's not this way naturally, that this is the
Yeah.
result of a lot of pressure, and she doesn't want to stay with it. I think Chrissy Teigen has said some stuff about this, about the reason she is not primarily active in modeling anymore is that there was so much pressure to not eat at all, to just be barely there, for like editorial photo shoots. This is also an interesting aside, that you may not have thought about. I presented in Australia some years ago, on media and body image, and a woman came up to me who had been like, she had actually been one of Australia's supermodels in the 80s. And
Wow.
she said, yeah, and she said, um, we used to laugh in the dressing rooms because we all looked like boys. We were so skinny and cut that we all looked like these tall, skinny boys. And we used to laugh about it because all of the designers were gay men. And so the idea is that, they're playing, like they're designing for women because that's the business, but their aesthetic of an attractive body was a body that looked
Is of
more
a
like a boy's
man. Oh
body.
my
Yeah.
goodness.
And so I don't, it's certainly the style trades. Gay men have always had a much bigger presence in the style trades than in a lot
Yeah.
of other occupations, which isn't to say that all designers are gay men, but it does bring up this sort of ironic possibility that, you have these generations of girls trying to lose all this weight to look like the ultimate beauty ideal that really isn't the beauty ideal of these girls like boys.
Heterosexual.
It's not the
Yeah.
beauty
Oh my
ideal of
gosh.
the boys they want to attract. And so this is where it gets hard to disentangle body image from from the drive for like sexual attractiveness, from the drive to disentangle that from the drive for status, because we really have this sense that skinny people are high status in our culture. And yet skinny people aren't necessarily the people who are considered the sexiest. And so often when you've got the two sort of options, people will pick the high status one. There are a lot of girls and young women who will choose to be thinner than they think men want, because they want so badly to be admired by their peers.
So do you think those two are the two driving factors behind like the main two concepts?
Well, certainly behind well,
Behind like the drive for thinness?
yeah,
Those two?
people can have a drive for thinness for other reasons, right? Like when they're not carrying extra weight, they feel better, right? Things like that. That's a very personal thing. That's really
Yeah.
about how they feel. Some people some people manage their anxiety by not eating much, and that is a risk factor for anorexia. But in terms of how other people treat us, I would say sexual attractiveness is part of it, but status is the driving factor. So just because we live in a world that is so brutal to people, but especially women who deviate from the ideal, that if you want to have the status that, not even like I want to be the best in the group or the most attractive, but just I don't want to be attacked. Skinny men get attacked, fat women get attacked, women who are seen as not, trying to be sexy enough get attacked. And so it's sort of like, what body is associated with being left in peace and like enjoying my life and doing what I want to do and not being made fun of or, targeted by other people. For men, size confers protection. Bigger men are less likely to get attacked. And for women, lack of size actually keeps people from, going after you. I mean, fat women are absolutely brutalized verbally and physically in this culture. And fat men can be too. So I think status is not just, do I look rich and classy and important and everything, but it's also, can I just be myself in this place with all these people, or am I going to get my appearance called out? Are people going to roll their eyes at me, make fun of me, think that I don't have any right to be here? So that's what I mean by status. It's
Yeah.
are people just going to look at you like you're okay and you look fine, or are they going to be attacking you on some physical attribute?
Wow, that's so
That's
sad to think about just how wow. And for do you think that it is realistic kind of to solve this problem? Like, do you see that happening, or do you just think there's going to be like a shift, or do you see this worsening and kind of continuing to spread, and it's just kind of going to be like a fact of life from
I,
here on out?
I think people will always be aware of the high status accorded to thinness in our culture, because you still see it with modeling and advertising and stuff. And keep in mind, the reason thinness is even considered an accomplishment is that we live in a culture where our food system is there's so much energy and so little nutrition. So it's very hard in our culture to be properly to be have enough nutrition without overeating calories, because we
Yeah.
just don't, we have too much low nutrient, high energy food. So within a culture like that, it's also like some kind of weird achievement to be thin, because most people are not. So that will probably continue. But I actually get really encouraged by some of these little enclaves of resistance that I see in social media, like, you know, people on TikTok, that, like body positivity collectives on TikTok. Or I only learned recently about these sort of collectives of young people with Tourette syndrome, right? So Tourette syndrome can cause these physical tics. Your body moves
Hmm.
without you really being able to
Without
control it.
control.
Yeah, and there's this whole collective of young people with Tourette syndrome doing things like trying to pour, a bottle of Coke into a glass, and it's like their hand is ticking and shaking, and they're doing it for each other. And to an outsider, it might look like you can make fun of them for this, but you can see on the inside, it's like this wonderful space where they can totally be themselves, and no one who's watching them thinks twice about this unexpected tick, these uncontrollable movements of the body, because they all have Tourette's too. So just being the opportunity for social media to link people up with other people who are like them is it's a tremendous possibility. It has tremendous opportunity for self-acceptance by linking people with other people who for whom this is totally not out of the ordinary, right? Like everyone's just like that. So I think there's promise, but each individual has to take an active role in stepping away from the stuff that makes them feel bad and going toward the stuff that makes them feel whole and accepted.
So you think it's more of an individual choice to kind of let go of the way you think you're supposed to be because society tells you that way, your gender stereotype, and less of like a community, culturally wide effort, kind of.
There's just so much variability out there. I'm not sure how much of a community effort
There could
would.
be.
Yeah, yeah. And then also, depending on the people you're talking to, like I've got 3 kids and my oldest is 14, so she's active on TikTok. And if I come in and I say, as her mom, and I say, well, what you're looking at, that's not attractive. You should look like these people. And it's like, people from the 70s or something. She rolls her eyes. It's like, you're not my generation. So it would be, I mean, as her mom, I would never body shame her or anything like that. I
Yeah.
play a big role there. But in terms of, it just doesn't make sense to say, all right, I'm going to step in as an elder in this group and say, well, that's not attractive. You shouldn't aspire to that, because if they think it's attractive, they're going to aspire to it.
Yeah.
So really, the only community effort that I think can be effective here is if members of the community steer young people toward content that shows the great diversity in human bodies and the way they look and in the way they function and what they do, so that when they see people with differences, they don't go, ooh, what's that? But they go, oh, yeah, that's whatever. Because they're going to have differences of their own, and they're going to need to be able to accept those differences with that same sort of, oh, yeah, that's just part of life. That's part of humanity, that same attitude, as opposed to, oh my God, what's wrong with this part of your body?
Yeah.
So we want them to see the diversity of human bodies and beings as what makes humans really interesting.
Yeah. Wow, yeah, I agree with that. Individual acceptance, finding other people to make you not feel like you're alone or you're not so far skewed off of the normal body that
Yes.
society wants you to have. Alrighty, I have just one final question. So now that we've just discussed this in depth, how would you describe the relationship between social media and body image for adolescents, like in a sentence or just a short explanation, not just a one-word answer, but I'm
Oh, well,
kidding.
I mean, it seems to be a continuation of what we saw with traditional mass media, which is overall social media exposure is more likely to make you feel bad about your body than good about your body. But that's like saying, eating at an amusement park is more likely to make you gain weight than lose weight, or lose weight than gain weight if you wanted to gain weight. The important thing is there are options in that. There are options in there that can make you feel great, and you need to look for them. It's a lot like the conversation on social media, right?
Yeah.
Connect with some friends who like you the way you are, and then you get something good out of it. But if you're just consuming everything out there willy-nilly, most of it's going to make you feel bad. So we just have to give ourselves permission to be a lot more selective about what we watch and how we engage on social media.
Thank you so much for discussing all of this with me. You did a great job answering all my questions, really relates to my research and said so much eye-opening stuff. So thank you, Professor Harrison.